Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm your host, Dana Kay. Welcome back to the Soaring Child. Look, today we are exploring a very intriguing topic, and it's going to touch every single listener of this podcast. Listen to this: birth order. As a parent of multiple children, I've often wondered how much their birth order shapes who they are and how they interact with the world. I remember moments when my oldest seemed so, responsible, not back in the day, but now he seems so more responsible. My youngest, so carefree. And I thought, does birth order explain this? I remember back in the day when my older son was diagnosed with ADHD. He was all over the shop, and my younger son was just, small and little. And I'm like, does birth order explain this? And more importantly, how does it affect our family dynamics and even their personal choices later in life? Now, to help unravel this, I'm actually really thrilled to introduce Dr. Robert Hurst, or as he calls himself, Dr. Bob. Dr. Hurst is a Harvard graduate with over 50 years' experience in private orthodontics practice in Louisiana. I mean, we're talking about birth order, and he's an orthodontist. We're probably thinking to ourselves, how does this tie in? But during his career, he closely studied the birth order and behavioral patterns of his patients, offering a very unique perspective grounded in real world observations rather than just theory. Dr. Hurst has also served on the dental school facilities at both Tufts University and Louisiana State University, and he spent decades uncovering how birth order expressions shape behaviors, relationships, and decision making. His insights are going to provide a fascinating lens to better understand ourselves and our children. So now it is time to welcome Dr. Bob to the Soaring Child. Hi, Dr. Bob. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello. Wonderful to be here. And what a great introduction that was.
Oh, thank you.
You hit all the points.
Oh, yeah. Look, I like to start my podcast with just, tying it to my family and introducing the guests. And this topic is fascinating. So I want to dive straight in and use all the time that we have together. Let's start with the basics. What is birth order? Why does it have such sort of an impact on family dynamics?
Well, the simplest way to look at it is the child's order of birth within the family. But that's oversimplistic. And that's the reason why people that have picked up books on birth order usually discard them, because it's much too simplistic. In fact, when I started my orthodontic practice, I realized I had to get the cooperation of teenagers, which in itself is a job.
That's for sure.
And I had to make a decision rather quickly when I first saw them to how was I going to get to them to get their cooperation in the treatment. So I started with the idea of birth order, and I looked at it, and traditionally they talk about an only child, the oldest, the middle, and the baby. What I found out is it's not that simple. True, there is an only child, but then there's a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. And people talk sometimes, oh, I'm the middle child. Well, how can you have a middle when you have 4 children? How can you have a middle child when you have 2 children? Everybody has their own personal characteristics, and they develop them by interacting with their siblings, except, of course, for the only child. He gets the flavor of the dominant parent's birth order. So not all only children are the same. So when I started using it, I was about ready to throw out the whole idea because only about a third of my patients fit those characteristics. And then I decided I'd look at all those families and see the years between the children. And I found out that 2/3 of all my patients were separated by their siblings by 4 or more school years. Then
Mm.
it hit me. It's not so simple. These children had double birth orders. They had the birth order of an only child, which gave them all that super confidence that an only child has, but it added to their ordinal number of birth. Like if you're the third and there's a big gap, then all those characteristics of a number three are amplified, intensified, and magnified, where just the number three is not the same as a three only. So the three only, she comes into the office and she wants to be seen.
Oh,
She's
okay.
on
We're
she's
getting
on
personal
stage.
here. Yeah. Well,
Yes,
I'm a third child, and I have my next sibling is 6 years older than me, and my oldest is 9 years older than me. So that does that make me a three only? Is that what you were
that's right.
saying?
It makes you a three only, and the first two above you are a one and a two, and then there's a big gap, and then you come along. So you're like a second family within the family. Now
Oh.
that you have the only child that goes with you because you have no other siblings younger. But I'll
Mm.
give you an example of another type of double birth order. And I don't want to get into the weeds with this, but I'll give you a name and everyone will relate to it. Princess Di.
Okay.
Princess Di had two older sisters, just like you have two older siblings. Then there was a 4 or 5 year gap, and she was born. And then 2 years later, her brother was born. So Princess Di was the third born, just like you, but she's also the oldest in the second family. So she becomes a 1-3 double birth order. So when you add those types, you're talking about 16, 17, 18 different types of birth orders. So if you understand the double birth order thing, everybody falls into a pattern. So it's
Mm.
not so simple and it really works.
Wow. And so, let's start with the basics. Let's go, okay, let's just take a typical family, three children, 2 years apart, first, second, third. Okay. What talk us through it?
Okay.
What are the
Well,
classics traits?
just remember all birth orders have two sides. For instance, the number one birth order, they want to be in charge and they want to give orders and whatever. Well, there's two sides of that. One is a very bossy person telling people what to do, and another type of one that can't do enough for you, cooks and cleans and whatever. They still want to control you, but they control you from a different way. So they don't appear to be the same, but they're basically the same person. They want to be in control. So some will kill you with kindness, some will kill you with just, verbal abuse.
Yes.
But anyway, the firstborn starts out life as an only child.
Hmm.
Everything was great for them until the next child is born. Then they go from being an only to a one. And everything was wonderful as a one, but now they're having to share something with number two. Well, they want to control the throne, they want to be in charge. So they're usually the better student in school. And number two can't be the better student because, after all, he's younger. So they become the better athlete. They might have more of an outgoing personality. But number two wants the number one position. So, should number one fail, number two is right there to take over and becoming the straight A student. It happened with Cain and Abel.
Hmm.
There was a little sibling rivalry that didn't end too well, but sibling rivalry is very common, and you have to look at that when you're trying to find your real birth order, because maybe as a number two, you dethrone number one, and it's very easy to find out. You just say, who is better in school? Whoever is better in school, that's the one who took the number one position. They're still a number two, but now they have to do the job of number one. Not so easy sometimes. Then number three comes along. We call about number three, when they're born, they have to understand 17 different relationships within the family: the mother, the father, the kids, the older kid, the second kid, the kid to him. So they're great with groups of people. Number threes are not afraid of groups. Instinctively, they pick up all the relationships that are going on around them. But we call them laughing on the outside, crying on the inside, because a true number three is very, very sensitive. And they don't want to let the other birth orders know how sensitive they are. So sometimes they create a wall around themselves and they look tougher than they really are, but that's just for protection. And but these are the creative people. These are into music, art. They see life so differently. They see it as a world thing. They want to change the climate. They want to. They see the world very differently than 1 and 2. And then number 4 comes along. That's the true baby in the family. This is the
Mm.
loud kid because no one listens to him. You know, they may hit you on the shoulder to get their attention, but they are also not afraid of older people because they had all older siblings. So, you know, they have great personalities, but they're not so responsible as kids. They're the ones that drop their appointment card on the way out of the office, but the older siblings there to help them. So those are the basic ideas of birth order. So when I got that down and then I added the onlys to them or the double birth orders, then everything fell into line and you can explain everything and you can unmask everybody, which is great.
Wow, wow. You're hearing this, and a lot of it makes sense. But some listeners might be thinking to themselves, "Well, it's just a theory. It's probably not correct." What kind of evidence sort of supports its sort of influence? That birth order on personality and behavior.
Well, I can give you the background because it started with Alfred Adler and Freud. Alfred Adler was in the same psychoanalytical society as Freud, and but they didn't see eye to eye. Freud felt that the kids' relationship was based on their relationship with the parents. And Adler said, no, the relationship is based on your interaction with the children. And of course, they split ways. They didn't see eye to eye. And it was interesting because Freud was the oldest in his father's second family, and Adler was a number 2. So they weren't going to get along anyway. So Adler really was the father of birth order theory. But let me just mention to your audience a few things that they can look at to look for proof. Look at the family photo album. Who's got all the pictures? It's number 1. They've got all the pictures in the album. And then number 2 has less, and number 3 even less, and number 4 is lucky to find 1. We do a thing in our office every so many years. We put our baby pictures out for the patients to pick out, who's who. And one of my staff said, Dr. Bob, they're going to find you right away. I said, how can they? We're all baby pictures. He says, no, yours is the only one that's going to be in black and white.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, look at your family album. Um, Go back to your 25th high school reunion. Everybody is the same as they were when you were in high school. They didn't change. Their personalities didn't change. One might be an investment banker, one might be a school teacher, one might be a stay-at-home mom. They're the same they were when you went to high school. Um, Go to your family functions. How about Thanksgiving? We just had Thanksgiving. When you go back home, you are just the place where you were in the family. You may be very successful or what you doesn't make any difference. If you're the baby, you're going to still be sitting at the little kids table. So, you look around and all of a sudden everything falls into place. So, your evidence is your own life. You can see.
Yeah. Fascinating, fascinating. I just got off the phone with the mother of a child whose ADHD is out of control. This mother feels so guilty not being able to help him, and it's heartbreaking, especially because I know it doesn't have to be this hard. ADHD does not have to dictate the mood of your entire family. Most of the time, when a child is diagnosed with ADHD, only one treatment option is provided: medication. I'm not against medication, but if that medication doesn't work and the next step is just another pill to address the side effects of the first, and then another, there's got to be a better way. A way that doesn't just address symptoms, but instead looks at underlying stresses in the body that are actually creating and exacerbating those symptoms in the first place. It's my mission in life to help families reduce ADHD symptoms naturally without medication. After helping my own son completely reduce his ADHD symptoms and now helping over 1,000 other families, now I want to teach you these strategies as well. I have put it all together in a free ADHD fast class, or maybe you would say, if you're in America, fast class. In less than 20 minutes, you can discover my proven 3-step process to reduce ADHD symptoms naturally, sometimes in as little as 30 days. Look for the link to join this free fast class in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the show. And so you've mentioned double birth orders a couple of times. How just explain that a little bit and what that means, and sort of how I know you discovered it through obviously the amount of patients that you've seen and how they didn't fall in, not all of them fell into that category, but can you just explain, what can affect them, how when bringing in that double birth order might shape their personality in a way that sort of differs from that traditional birth order trait?
That's a great question, and that's the reason why I mentioned first about the double birth orders. What you have to really find out is your true birth order, and your true birth order is how you're functioning within your family. For instance, we talked about dethroning or sibling rivalry. Well,
Yes.
you might not be a two, now you're functioning as a one. There might be twins in the family. Twins come into the family and they take a tremendous amount of energy. So if the firstborn is one, the next born is the twins. That's number two and three. And by the way, the twins will pick out who is going to be the oldest and the youngest, and they have those same personalities. But then number one says, wait a minute, what about me? You're ignoring me. I'm supposed to be the queen bee here, but you're spending all the time with the twins. So that child gets very resentful about what's happening in their life and might carry it throughout their life. But what I really want to talk about is ADHD kids, which is
ADHD
what
kids.
which is ADHD. But we know those come in two varieties too: the hyperactive and the very quiet, just like birth orders do. But what happens is they start to represent the double type of birth order because everything is heightened with them. This is what's unique about their problem. They might be a two, but they're not just a two anymore. They are a super two. And so the parents have to look at them more like a two only child because they need so much attention and so much power. They can't control their power. And so that's what's so unique about it. So when you have a child with this problem within the family order, that changes the whole order of the family. So you're not just dealing with their number, you're dealing with, you might be thinking, that double birth order type. That's why I wanted to talk about that first, because
Yeah.
that's what's so special about these kids.
So what I'm hearing is this true birth order. It could be quite hard to determine. There are a number of factors. So it may be that if your kid's got a disability like ADHD, it may be that there's extra years between when one child was born to another child being born. It may be that you've got a divorce. I assume could affect the birth order, the true birth order. Is that right?
Yes, and that's fascinating about blended families when you put two together. Every child that keeps their same birth order or goes up the scale is well adapted to the new family. Every child that gets demoted is a problem. And if they have ADHD, it's really a problem. So, that's when they say, well, my children have gotten so well adapted to this new family. How come yours aren't? Well, maybe all of those children got demoted. But you can predict it. You can predict this. Now, I can tell you a little story. One of my patients, and when you're in a small town, sometimes you see, all different, lots of families are all interrelated somehow. Well, this one little girl was an only child. Her mother finally decided to remarry, and it happened to be they were patients of mine too. She had the man she married had two daughters that were older than this little only child, and she was looking forward to getting a daddy and getting some sisters and whatever, and life was going to be great. They married, and the little only child had to share the room with her two older stepsisters. Didn't work out. She started as a patient. She was a wonderful patient. After they got married, She was breaking things. She wouldn't show up for appointments. She was sullen. She was doing badly in school. She got demoted from an only child to a number three. And
Mm.
within 6 months, they were divorced, and she was back in her own room in her own house. So, birth order, it has effects on their parents too. You can see what
Yeah.
happens.
Definitely. Now, look, as a parent, you're hearing this information. Understanding your child's personalities and needs is essential. How can parents or listeners really use this birth order as a tool to better understand and support their children, especially those with ADHD?
Well, first of all, you don't want to treat all your children alike. You
Hmm.
don't want to have the same expectations for all of them, but you want to fall into their unique gifts that they have. For instance, the only child, well, that one they'll do whatever they want to do. But the firstborn, give them responsibility because that's what they want. They want to take on responsibility. Most of our CEOs or firstborns are only children because they want to be in charge. And, you don't want to deny them being in charge. Then the number two, if that's going to be your social person or your athlete, encourage that. Make them different. You want to make sure that each child does want to be different. If they go to school, the same school, number two is told by the teachers, how come you can't be like your older brother? Well,
Mm.
he's not. He doesn't want to be, and so on. So each child is unique. Treat them uniquely, but also look for those relationships between the children and see where there might be some rough areas. And if it's, well, we have to take care of number three because number three has this medical problem, well, then you have to look at it from their viewpoint. Number one's going to look at that differently than number two is going to look at it to take care of number three. So you have to look at the interrelationships. And in my book, it will explain how to find your real birth order, answer these 7 questions, and then you know who you really are. And then it's important for the parent to know if their child, and I'll tell you another funny story, has a higher birth order than themselves. One of the gals in my office is a number 4. And number 4s are great working in groups of people, and they're great working with orthodontic patients. And your best friend, by the way, your best friend will be your birth order. Her best friend is another number 4. And one day at lunchtime, they said, "Well, we want to go to lunch, but we don't know where to go. We can't make a decision." And so she said, "Let's get our 2 girls out of school." Her 2 girls were both number 1s. They'll know where we should go to lunch. So they went and they took their kids out of school. They decided where to go to lunch. So if your child has a higher birth order than you, look out because you're not in charge.
And I love that you said, your best friend usually is the same birth order as you, and my best friend from Australia is the same birth order as me. So that's
Oh,
fascinating.
it's just not ironic. It's real.
Yeah, it's real. It's
Right.
real. Oh, this is so fascinating. Now, I where do people go and find more information about this? Because this has just touched the surface. I mean, we could go on for hours and hours, but I know that parents are probably going, okay, well, this could be a game changer in how we manage our family, how we work with each child individually.
Well, they could go have several websites, but the one they should go to would be easy to remember mybirthorder.com. How easy is that?
That is like,
And in there, you will find there'll be some, podcasts in there, and there's videos, there's all kinds of things. But we also have a store which you can find my book, which is called Life's Fingerprint. I'll lift it up here. How birth
mm,
order affects your path throughout life. And in it, what's unique is that this isn't written by a psychologist who has patients that are in trouble. This is written for people everyday life. And I have examples in there of all the possibilities you could have: girl, boy, boy, girl. And I give you examples of families you would know, of politicians, actresses, something like that, something you could relate to and say, yes, that's my family, that's what I look like. But we also have on there, uh, we have a USB. It's on a little card,
yes.
and you can stick that in your computer. But I suggest you get the book. It's in color, hardcover, And it's a coffee table book, great for the holidays. You sit it on there, and then everybody starts to look themselves up. There's a paperback edition that you can get on Amazon, but it's not in color, and it doesn't have a question and answer section in the back, which I put in from all my talks. So there'll be questions and answers that people have asked me about. So that's what I'd suggest to get more information.
I love that it could be that could be a very fascinating coffee table book. I love that idea. Look, I ask every guest that comes onto the podcast, if you could share just one small sort of actionable tip that parents, can start doing today about birth order, what would that be?
Well, you should look at your children, try to find their real birth order, see if you have any double birth orders within your family, and then you'll see where the power is in the family and what that child needs. For instance, a 2 is thought to be stubborn, but they don't want to be told what to do. That's the difference. They want to protect their own space. But if you have a 2 only in your family, you have an immovable object. That child will never do what you tell them. So what you have to do is you have to give them choices. You say, we're going out to get fast food tonight. Would you like to go to Wendy's, McDonald's, or Burger King or something? You give them choices. Don't give them a yes or no, because you're going to get a no. And now you got to fight with them.
Fantastic. So this could be a game changer for families out there. I know what
I
I'm
hope
doing
so.
as soon as I stop recording. I'm definitely going to buy that coffee table book. That's for sure. This has been so fantastic, Dr. Bob. Thanks for joining me today and sharing your passion, your knowledge with all of our listeners. Just please tell again where everyone can find more about your work and follow you online.
www.mybirthorder.com.
That's it. Fantastic. Thank you once again for joining me today. Listeners, I hope this episode gave you, valuable insights into how birth order might really shape your family dynamics and even your own behaviors. If you found this conversation as fascinating as I did, definitely please subscribe to this podcast, share it with someone who might benefit, or leave us a review. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Donna Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at ADHDthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.